Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Beyond Terrain podcast. I'm your host, Leo Dalton. We're joined today by Matt Roeske from Cultivate, Elevate. Matt is certainly a fountain of knowledge. I'm sure we could talk for a very, very long time about a lot of different topics. He seems to have um, some knowledge in a lot of areas, which I appreciate. And actually, listening to him in the last couple of years has been almost a motivation of really looking at things holistically. Like even in the health world, we tend to look at things from a holistic lens, and we look at it still in, we're still pigeonholed a little bit here by looking at it from the health area, whereas Matt's really going beyond and looking at different types of farming practices, looking at I've heard him speak about ancient civilization. I've heard him speak about what's happening in the world right now. So really, he's taken a perspective that's truly holistic, which has certainly broadened my horizons and definitely motivated me to look at a lot more than just health per se, because everything is always tied together. So if you are talking about health, there's always more to it. So, anyways, that's long enough. I'll thank you, Matt, for coming today. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me on. And it's more than protein, carbs, fats. That's the best way to say with the health.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, but you know what? For some reason, we always start with the protein, carbs, and fats. I remember going to the gym, and that was my life for a good couple of years there. So
Yep.
yeah, but then you branch out. So that's great. So Matt, I asked my guests at the start of the podcast, I asked them to define health and kind of tell us what health means to them. And I'm sure you'll have a nice holistic answer for us, but I think it gives us a good baseline to work off of. So what does health mean to you, and what does it feel like? What does it look like? Just any information you want to give on that.
Well, I think health comes in multiple different, aspects, whether it's related to knowledge, whether it's related to taking care of your terrain, taking care of your home, taking care of your loved ones. It comes with, there's an emotional aspect too of love. There's the food aspect. There's how you sleep. I mean, you can go into so many things, clothes that you wear, lights that you have in your home. All of these things dictate your health. And when I was in the fitness world, I didn't realize all of these other things. I just was thinking food, and food, and that's part of the fitness way. But I didn't realize also too that our food has changed so much, due to Monsanto and all of those things. But as I started to get into it, I started to realize there's multiple different ways to elevate our health. And as we start to correct little things at a time, step by step, we can elevate our health to our truest potential. And it really started to make me realize that we are self-regenerating beings. We heal so quickly. It's snap of the finger, and everything in the ether is snap of the finger as well. So, the more we start to connect these things, we start to see, okay, well, if I take care of myself and I have all this, positivity and energy and beauty over here, then everything just goes up. If I do the opposite, the body just instantaneously falls apart. So, when I had my health ailments, I realized that it was the food that I was consuming, the GMOs, the toxins. And as I started to clean all of that up, magically everything went away like that. And I didn't have to do that much. It's actually so simple. So, as I started to change that, I started understanding different things with frequencies and lights and clothing, the dangers of Wi Fi, all these other things that play a role too. And then it all started to connect. And I go, wow, this is so simple. It's pretty much just, things spinning the wrong way, you're ill. Things spinning the right way, you're healed. And that's kind of, if I were to put it into what I think health is, it's just a very simple process and we can understand it, but we make things too complex. We give things thousands of names and like thousands of different things of all the same thing. And we just have to simplify things because when I look out here into nature and I see beautiful nature in front of me, everything's very simple. It's very, very simple. It's not complicated. So we really have to kind of go back to the basics, and that is what health is.
Awesome. Great answer. My cat just broke in. It wasn't a ghost that opened my door there. Yeah, I love that answer. You know, and health is simple, and I think that's a topic that keeps coming up on this podcast. A lot of guests has mentioned that we really overcomplicate it as humans, and yeah, I think you put that really nicely, and especially, you got me thinking there. It's like these degenerative diseases honestly take a long time to develop. They almost take a lifetime to develop. You see chronic illness mostly in, older populations, right? So, um, it takes a long time to develop. And you see people heal very, very quickly from these ailments as well, as soon as they start changing their habits. And, there certainly cases of people with cancer who get, their diagnosis or they get told that they only have a few months to live, and then all of a sudden they quit their job and they start living their dream life, and then, a month later they're cancer free. So it's it's really an amazing thing that it can be very quickly too, like, it can be very quick. So yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up.
Well, and I like that you said that because when we're given the ultimatum, which is kind of what that is, then people can put themselves into a worse situation, because they've been given this
Yes.
diagnosis, which is just a guess. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a guess. And when they're given that, it's like, well, that can actually work on their psyche to put them into a worse state. Because if they didn't even know, they actually probably would have lived out their life and were perfectly fine. But when I got into healing and understanding things, I've been doing a lot into researching eyesight and how people would regenerate their eyesight, and people can heal their eyesight very quickly. And I always thought, well, the eyes get worse and worse and worse. That's why they give you thicker and thicker glasses. But they never address the root cause. And as I started getting into, like you just said, with the other illnesses and other diseases that people start to suffer from, they take a long time. Like you said, like it builds up. Fluoridosis of the body, which leads to arthritis and osteoporosis, that takes years. A person over 65, if they fall and break a bone, it's because there's so much fluoride in their bones after 60 years of that fluoride building up. But the cool thing is some tamarine paste or some shilajit will pull all that right out within about a month. So you start to see this is remarkable what the body can do. And we're not taught about this because it puts us in this fear set or feeble or scarcity mindset, and it keeps the control. And as I started to realize that when I was in my dark rabbit holes of, all these crazy things I used to research, I realized that's to keep you there too. And that can impact your health. But it's as easy as just changing your day, just changing the way you wake up, changing what you're observing, what you're learning, who you're learning from, what you're eating. All of the it's very simple. And we, just like we said, overcomplicate these things for things that have been going on for a long period of time, or we stay stuck in our ways, and that's why we don't change. We're like, I've been doing this for 50 years. Well, it probably is not working now, so we got to change it because it's a different time than that time. And same with the food. It's not 1902 food anymore that's all organic. It's a different time, and we have to be aware of that. And I feel like that's part of us, constantly changing with our terrain.
Yeah. Well put. Yeah. And one thing I've been looking into is the diagnosis itself. And you brought this up here, how the diagnosis can put you into this scarcity mindset. And you know, the best thing that you said, because we're put this fear mindset, this scarcity mindset, it is pushed onto us, right? It's really prevalent in today's society, especially in the last few years. We saw a great example of that, and moving forward with the whole climate situation. But I think the most important thing that a lot of people, especially in this community, have to understand is that it does go both ways. And so, like you said, I've been down these deep rabbit holes where everything's bad and we're being controlled and the elites are coming for us and all that. But guess what? I was so unproductive during these times because I was in this fear mindset. So it's like fear and scarcity and these emotions that you're facing, like, will hold you back. It doesn't matter what side of the coin you're on, right? It's almost like even if you discover the other side, but you never get out of this idea that the elites are ruining your life. Well, guess what? The elite, they don't really care about you. I'm not denying that it's probably true, but I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's about taking responsibility, taking charge. And this is a real central topic to this podcast because, it's all about responsibility. And it's like you said, it's about changing your day. And that comes with waking up and changing your habits and having a good nighttime routine, even to set yourself up for a good morning too, right? So
Well, I like how you said that because there's two paths you can take. You can sit in that dark and despair path that's filled with darkness and all kinds of weird stuff, and who knows what rabbit hole you're going to lead yourself to, or you can take yourself into a different side. And when I was in my dark path, like you said, you spend hours and hours researching documents and whatever else. It's not getting me anywhere. It's not finding me a solution. And as I
Yeah.
started to learn the solutions and the counters towards things, like for example, we're never running out of water. That's the whole typical, the water's going away, we don't have any. The earth produces water 24/7, 365. There's millions of gallons being produced underneath our feet. This is why when they go mining, all the mines flood out because all the water starts
Yeah.
pouring in through the walls. Or if people's basements flood, another one too, the water's coming up from in the earth. But that it can put you in a state that you're now controlled. You're like, oh, I'm gonna run out of this water, and I got to start storing it up because I'm not gonna have it. And then as you're in that frantic state, you can't do anything else logically, and that's a paralysis, I've realized. And I've seen it on social media. Even with the last
Yeah.
thing with the Miami and these like alien things and whatever else nonsense. It's another state to be like, oh, now aliens are coming. If it's not this, it's something else, and if it's not that, it's something else. It's to keep you. It's using your energy as a currency. And what I started to realize is when I got to a point of watching some of this stuff and whatever, I just turned it off. And I realized, like you
Mm,
said, this is not getting me anywhere. It's not helping
mm.
society. It's not helping me help society. It's not helping my family and my friends. It's just putting me in this dark, lower frequency. And then when I would meet people, guess what's the first thing I'd tell them? Hey, the weather's being changed. It's like I didn't even say hello yet. I didn't even say how are you? How is everything going? Because what happens is we get into this frantic state. So it's important
Sure.
to put ourselves into a state of awareness to realize what is going on. I won't deny that these things are going on, but it's important to have awareness. And then I started to realize through my research that there's a solution to everything. If we give our power away and we consent to somebody taking our power away, then we're controlled. But if we take back that and we focus on what we can do every day, it's a completely different story. And that's what I've seen this in the last 3 years. You see this flip on social media where it was like chaos and whatever else. And then there's another side where it's not being shown, where people are growing their own food. They're homeschooling more than ever. They're not putting any of these into their body anymore. They're doing a whole different thing because they realize this whole thing, but they realize the whole truth on it and going, wow, this doesn't make any sense anymore. And almost
Yeah.
like 2020 had to be this like break where it just breaks the realm and shatters everything in which you once believed in, which can create change. So it's like, and it's going to create paths, but it made me realize I can sit here and be in this crazy state where I'm like losing my hair, or I can sit here and be like, how can we find solutions? What can we do? Are there solutions? And what can we do as a community? How can we involve other people? And what's
Yeah.
funny is I realized that through social media, even me meeting you today, we're connecting because we're on the same frequency, the same bandwidth, and that's only going to continue at the same rate because people are
Mhm.
over it. And I think that that's important that people have to see that side because it's not broadcasted because it's always like, oh, it's the end of the days. It's always the end of the days.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, really, like, um, that the first couple years there, 2020, 21, um, you know, that was when it was, you're in the depths of all that. But when I started looking at this as a blessing, I really looked at it as a blessing because I saw so many people now are over it. They're kind of taking their power back, but they're realizing, okay, hold on a minute, you know, we're kind of in charge of our own well-being here. I really see a huge growth in this, and I really look at it as a blessing, not only for my community and everyone around me, but myself. I have this amazing perspective now, and like you said, now it's focusing on the positive, it's focusing on the solutions, it's focusing on moving forward rather than being stuck in this mindset. So, yeah, I think really because when it comes down to it, it's your mind, right? It's your perspective, and nothing was going to change, but I could have been stuck in this poor perspective. But now I'm looking at like what a blessing, look at where we are now. Look at, it's led me now to starting this podcast and connecting with so many amazing people, and sharing with so many people messaging me now. And we have fantastic conversations. It's such a blessing. It's such an amazing thing. So, but it all, I remember, like, I know looking back on my journey now, it was not anything happened to me, it was just that I shifted my perspective of looking at poor me, everyone's ostracizing me. I'm, the black sheep of the community. It's- everyone was singing that hymn there for a while, but shit, and what an amazing thing that happened. What an amazing thing. So I love it. Yeah. Yeah. Looking back, it's great. I want to talk about you mentioned scarcity a couple times, and you mentioned water. This is not a topic we've talked about a lot. Primary water. Maybe you could give us a little opener on that, and we could maybe talk about that for a little bit because I think that's a great topic.
Of course. So, the whole water running out is a scarcity mindset that has been instilled in broadcast. It started in about the 1960s. That's when they started pushing it a whole bunch that we're running out of water and we're not going to have enough water and everything else. But it's interesting because you can look up the primarywaterinstitute.org and you can learn all about primary water, the water that is underneath our feet. Dowsers used to go out with dowsing rods and find water based on the oscillations of the earth. And it's interesting because big oil and big electric hires dowsers to find water. So if it was woo
Wow.
woo, why does big oil and big electric use it? Kind of questions to ask. And then when you get more into water, we're told that we're running out, but we're always focused on the rain. We're focused on what's above us. We're always focused on the air. We're not focused on what's deep in the earth. And the most perfect example of how we're not running out of water was Lake Elsinore in the 1950s. Lake Elsinore started going dry, and the people started freaking out. And they decided in Lake Elsinore that they were going to build a pipeline and they were going to shuttle water from somewhere else, from I believe it was Mexico to California. And every time they built the pipeline, it went dry. And they started going, oh, what are we going to do? So there was a dowser who came out and he goes, if you drill right here, you'll find the water that you need because it's right below your feet. Just look. So he tells them that they said we don't believe in that. That's woo woo and pseudoscience, and we don't believe in any of those things. So they built another pipeline. That pipeline failed as well, and then so they decided to take a chance and drill where the dowser said, and they re-drilled that pipe, and Lake Elsinore is filled to this day. The water was never running out. It was just deep within the earth. And there's water veins which have been not polluted. It's fresh, structured, beautiful water. It doesn't have pesticides and fluoride and toxins in there. The earth is always producing this water. And, it's interesting because there was a situation in 2022 where water was placed on the stock market where they could manipulate the price. Well, it's at the exact same time that the mega drought happened. So you start
Hmm.
to connect these dots and go, just so happens there's a drought after the water was placed on the stock market and they could manipulate the price. Then you saw all these like water taxes, you shouldn't garden. You definitely shouldn't grow your own food, that whole thing and everything. But there's a great book, New Water for a Thirsty World. It's a great book that debunks all of the running out of water. And, when you get into all of this, you can just see that Mother Nature gives us abundance. But if we put dams all over the place, blocking up Mother Earth from flowing in the natural way it's supposed to, then we're going to be running out of water. And then when we have 50,000 man made holding tanks known as lakes, now we start to think, oh, the lake that only has 40% all the time is running low. And you see, they manipulate the stats, they manipulate our
Hmm.
minds, and they do this because they try to say there's no rain coming out of the sky, so we must not have any water. Now, what's
Yeah.
interesting is we've had record amounts of water this year, but now we don't hear that narrative. But if next year it's warmer, then we'll probably hear that narrative again. And this is how it gets flip-flopped all the time. They're just picking and choosing. In 2020, same thing. If a person came out and said germs do not make you sick, past 8 p.m., they were censored. But if now we say it, it's okay because it's this
Yeah.
flipping that just goes on. And it's like, okay, now it's okay to say that all of these were toxic and everything else. So you got to sit there and look at it and go, hmm, if instinctively I feel that I'm on a water planet, could I be running out of water?
Yeah, right. You gotta think about it. Okay, so what about oil? I've heard a lot of talk about oil being scarce too, eh? That's
So with the oil, oil is abiotic. The earth is always producing it. And it was funny when I put up a video on that, it was instantly taken down by all the
oh,
platforms. And I showed oil coming out of the earth. So like a perfect example, it's from an oil rig and they're just pulling the oil out of the earth. And what happened was my buddy who was on the rig said, he's like, yeah, this thing just fills up. Like we just come back every couple weeks and it's filled with oil all over again. And then, you see the prices change and, or, the gas prices and everything else. He's like, but we have unlimited amounts. The earth is always producing it. Oil is like the blood of the planet when you really think about it.
Yeah.
So it's like, how can we run out of the blood of the planet? Similar to the water. You have all these water veins coming up, and then same with the oil. And then when you get into natural gas, which is another one, they used to douse for natural gas. That's unlimited too. All of
Mhm.
these resources in which we're paying all of this amount of money for are all unlimited. And then you have these price fixes, which is just, them manipulating things and then telling you, well, we're running out. It was hurricane season. We ran out this year and we didn't have all of those reservoirs that we've had for indefinitely. And that's what I started to realize with the whole abundance and energy. The more I looked at the old times, 1900s, 1880s, 1890s, when they had like, 10 million light bulbs and like all these things running, there was quite an abundance going on. All of a sudden, about 1960s, 1970s, all of a sudden there became energy crises. And we heard all of
Mhm.
that in the 70s. We don't know what to do with energy. And it's like, oh, okay, so it just came now that it fits the agenda in which you're trying to sell me.
Yeah. Yeah. Scarcity sells, that's for sure. Yeah. Yeah. The my favorite part about the oil discussion is calling them fossil fuels.
The
You know
dinosaur.
how Yeah, how we dig for oil like at like thousands of feet deep, and then the deepest fossils like way above that. Like we're digging for oil down here, and the deepest fossils are way above them. But yeah, oil is just decomposed dinosaurs, right?
Well,
Yeah,
and like you said, they give these funny names. That's the Rockefellers bought out the educational system in 1910 with the Carnegies. So they
yeah,
started debunking, and the Rockefellers own the oil. That's what's funny. They're known for oil. They're the snake oil salesman. Like then when you get into this, so it's like they're telling you the opposite and now telling you it's from dinosaurs. And even with carbon dating, carbon dating is as accurate as a PCR test. So if you're going to tell me something is 10 million years old, how do you know if it has a 99.9% error rate? So you start to connect these dots and go, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Just but like you said, it's from dinosaurs, and if we run out of dinosaur bones, then we're running out of that. And that's the story we've been told.
that's the story I've been told. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So with this dowsing, right? what an amazing what an amazing thing, right? I've seen them with they're like little rods. Is it a specific metal that they use for it? It's like two little rods and they kind of move back and forth. For those in the video, we're using our hands here trying to show what we're talking about, but maybe you can explain that a little better.
So the dowsing rods are usually an L-shaped rod, and they can be made out of copper, bronze, or they can be used out of a hazel wood. They actually used to use a piece of hazel
Hmm.
wood in a stick, and when they would walk over a certain area and they were looking for water, they would get an oscillation or a spin that was determined underneath them, and then their stick would move up, and they would know exactly where the water was. And what's interesting is they could also ask the earth how deep is the water so that they would know where to like how deep to go into the earth, and it would basically be on depending on how many stick raises or dowsing rod raises that they get, or they could do it based on the cross. You could say, is this water 150 feet deep, and then what would happen is the earth would communicate back. And that's why if you think about like the Ouija board and that whole thing where they were like trying to make fun of it, but it's like the dowsing has gone back to, you're going back, it's so far in time. And the only reason dowsing was considered sorcery or witchcraft was because it separated them from the kingdom. I don't have to go to the king to get my resources anymore. I can find them myself. So when you get into dowsing, it's a very fun one to look into, and you're just picking up on the earth's energy. There's always energy pulsing all the time, and you're just picking on up that. And there's so many people who still do it to this day who are finding water all the time in a time in which we're running out of water.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and really interesting there. I was talking to a fella, a Christian man, and he was I was asking about this about Steiner's work on what do you call it? I'm blanking on his like agriculture, biodynamic. I was asking about biodynamic farming because I had talked to a farmer before that about it. someone half local here, and anyways, this Christian man was telling me that, he doesn't really subscribe to the idea of this dowsing and of biodynamic because um, it was actually calling on like demonic spirits was the language that he was using, and so that's why he didn't want to take part in it. And obviously, with a greater understanding of how religion's been used to certainly suppress the general population, especially going back to like you were mentioning in kingdoms. I just think it makes a whole lot of sense here that they might have used this narrative in that time too, because it's amazing that it's still prevalent and that this man and this man is amazing. He's an amazing farmer and he's such an amazing man. I really enjoy speaking to the guy, and he obviously takes a different perspective. And I'm not trying to put that down at all, but I just think that that's a really interesting observation that that was kind of used as a way to maybe disconnect us from the natural frequency, because what didn't make sense to me is I'm thinking, okay, well, like when I think of God, I really think of God as, as the creator of everything, right? And so um harnessing an energy that's from the earth doesn't really strike me as demonic, like I feel like when it becomes demonic is within our own minds if we're have poor intention. And I really think that human beings are the one that have created that. But anyway, that's maybe a discussion for another time, but I just thought that was really interesting, and you kind of just brought up something similar to that, so I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. But
No, I like that you said that because when you look at the churches, the mosques, the temples, those are all harnessing the atmospheric energy. The
yeah,
materials that they're built out of, they're antennas. You have
yeah,
antennas all over them. They're picking up on the ether. So when you walk into that building, you're picking up on those atmospheric energies, and the materials are picking up on that. Same with the color spectrums. All the glass windows, those are all showing you what the water in your body is going to turn into, the structure of the water. So that's another one. And when I
hmm,
got into electroculture, it was interesting because when I was studying the back, they were saying that the Royal Agriculture Society was using electroculture to tap into the energy to increase their yields. And what they noticed was where anywhere that there was an antennas, like let's say on top of the church, there was the cross, there was a piece of copper running down from the cross into the garden next door. So it's like
no
somebody
way.
was tapping into the atmospheric energy that they knew to run copper. Now they say that it's for lightning rods, but we know that if you tap into the atmospheric energy, you can increase your yields. And you always see the most beautiful gardens next to all these religious buildings as well. So you sit there and go, somebody knows something. And I found a book. It was an older book from the UK, and they showed
Yeah,
all the sacred gardens, how they drew them out with all the shapes. And I thought, think of how much work this would take. Think of all the
yeah,
work that this would take to create all of this, unless you know that it's resonating a frequency from the design that you create on the earth up above and down below, which then impacts everything around it. And it's like, when you get into gardening, people are like, oh, you just got a garden, but it's like there's much more to that. And Marcel Vogel showed all that when he was talking to plants and doing all the research he did. He
yeah,
created the crystals,
big
liquid
time.
crystal display. He was the creator of all that. But you get into all this and you go, this is all around us. We just have been, like you said, we've been separated from it or told that we should not connect into this. And what I started to realize is that keeps us from being self sufficient and independent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I recently spent some time in Italy and like traveling through Rome and going into all these amazing churches, and these buildings were just like phenomenal, and it's undeniable that there's a this energy when you walk into these buildings. It's amazing, and the way that they're built and the effort that's put into them, and you're thinking, I can't believe human beings built that. And then you compare it to what is what we're building now out of bricks and concrete, and it's just terrible. But yeah, because we spent a day in London and another trip there, and I remember looking around, and well, obviously a lot of the older structures were destroyed during the wars, but it was like you'd have this absolutely drop dead gorgeous cathedral, and next door you had this ugliest big brick building and you've ever laid your eyes on. And I'm thinking like someone's got to tear this brick building down and build a garden or something, because it's just an eyesore next to this gorgeous cathedral. But yeah, I like that. And you get into the idea of of harnessing this free energy from Earth. And this is kind of what Nikola Tesla was kind of tapping into, and Steiner was involved in, and you mentioned a couple that were involved in these ideas. And I just think it's the most fascinating thing, and I think it can obviously get rather complex when you're looking at the structures of these cathedrals, and they have the lightning rod and the filtering into like this chamber, this battery, or they have the balls full of mercury, and they're using copper and brass and these certain types of metals. But a really simple introduction that I actually learned from you was the electroculture, and you mentioned this, and I kind of built a little permaculture, hugel culture in my backyard there, and I stuck a coil of copper in wrapped around a piece of wood in the bottom layer, have a couple sticking out, and then a couple of copper pipes too. Really simple, doesn't really make any sense per se, but I actually had to abandon the project. There were forest fires here, and we were kicked out of our house for a few days. So I let it go, and then we went away for the summertime, and then come back, and it's just like shot up like crazy. There was nothing there. It was just some turned over sod and some soil, but it was like the most abundant of just these natural flowers and weeds, we call them, but just beautiful plants that grew amazingly. And it was just, I really had no rhyme or reason to what I was doing. I just bought some copper down at the Rona down the road, and I just wrapped it around some wood. So, and electroculture, you introduced me to that. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that because I think it's so fascinating.
So it's funny that you say that because I had a friend who had found out that one of the trees by their house was like going crazy. It was producing tons of apples, and they couldn't figure out why that one was producing tons of apples. And they found out that one of the family members threw a copper pipe like years ago in the ground, and it's been just sticking out of the ground this whole entire time. And that apple tree has been just pumping out apples the whole entire time. So, like you said, the copper situation, if you just kind of try to take it in, it's hard to kind of understand. But you have to think of electrical conductivity. And Tesla was big in copper. You get into all of his Tesla coils and grounding coils. You go into Nathan B. Stubbenfield. He was huge in copper. He was the one who created the first telephone and radio, which they don't talk about. But all of these people understanding the ground energy, and that's what you're tapping into, because the Earth is producing static fields or charges all the time. This is why lightning comes down and there's a discharge. It's trying to break that up and fix everything. So there's all this electricity that's just pumping out. And as you create these antennas and place them in your garden, you're basically creating kind of like a grid system that's harnessing static fields and harnessing the energy of that area. And it's interesting that you said that after things burned, it was even better, because I always talk about basalt, which is volcanic ash, which when you place volcanic ash all over your soil, you're putting all this quartz all over your soil and all these minerals. So if you think about it, you increase the electrical conductivity with the electroculture that you just mentioned, and then now you have the ashes. Now you have everything go crazy. And Steiner, when you look at his stuff, he was big into putting cow horns with manure and quartz together all into the soil so that he could increase the energy, because a cow horn makes a point. It makes a pyramid and it makes an antenna. So he would do that. But when I got into all of this topic, it was back when I was living at my place, and I had a moringa plant, and I decided to try it out. And I started researching the work of Victor Schauberger. He was talking all about copper. If you spin things with a vortex, you can structure water, you can clean water, you can do so much with copper. And it was interesting because he presented all of the things that I, am talking about in the 1940s to the politicians, and it all got dismissed because they were getting kickbacks from the fertilizer companies, and decided to put out a radio broadcast that if you use copper tools or copper in your soil, you won't yield as much food and you won't make as much money as a farmer. And when you sit there and think about that, farmers at that time were like, well, then I can't take that chance. I can't lose my money, but
Definitely.
all of this was presented. And as I started to get into more books, you're going Germany, Electroculture, you're going Royal Agriculture Society in New South Wales in Australia, 1835, 1855, writing essays about electroculture. So you just keep going back and you keep seeing everybody's realizing we can tap into this energy. So when I started talking about this, things just went crazy and people started trying it. And I've just seen remarkable results people sending me beets the size of my head. I had a fellow send me, a watermelon that was 40 something pounds full of seeds, which is a big one
Yeah,
too. It always has the seeds,
important.
but just all these beautiful things. And it made me realize we don't need pesticides. We don't need Monsanto. We don't need to spray Mother Earth with chemicals and expect healthy food or healthy people, like we talked about in the beginning of this. How can we be healthy if we're poisoning our planet? It doesn't make any sense. So when I got into this, I realized, wow, we don't need any of that. And all of the fertilizers and everything they sell at the store has a lot of iron in it. All that iron leads to rust and decay. Copper, there's no rust and decay. There's just increases in electrical conductivity. So when you get into this topic, it's mind blowing the more you start to look back and you look at these books and articles and everything else. But it started a movement, in my opinion, of independence. People realizing I can try this, test it out, see what happens, and if it goes crazy, I can give food to my friends and family. If it doesn't, I can
Yeah.
try it again and see how it goes. And it was interesting because there was one of the guys in Florida. He was clearing up the stuff in the sky using electroculture, and it made me start to realize that all those atmospheric antennas that used to be on top of the churches, the mosques, the temples, I bet that those have a lot to do with getting rid of what's going on in the air. But it's not taught about because that's the first part of these buildings or the cathedrals that they start taking off. All the antennas. They don't do anything on the inside. They always specifically go for the antennas. So what we have to do is take back our land and start trying these things out and seeing what happens. And I guarantee you'd be like, wow, I got every bird, bee, pollinator, and other thing going on now. I should have tried this a while back.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, and I have a little story I want to share. It's to do with the forest fires that we experienced here. Fortunately, we're very fortunate because our house is okay. We sustained a little smoke damage. That was pretty much the worst of it. But the fire came, it was coming down, and so I'd already built my permaculture. I just like to think this is that it helped, right? Because the fire actually came down and it burned around our house. It literally split. It's only like 100 meters away from us, the burn line, across the road behind us, but it literally split and it went around us. So we're very, very lucky. Obviously, the first responders are certainly to thanks, but maybe the increase in energy in this area helped to give them the strength. But I just thought that was really interesting. It literally split and went around us when really the landscape is all extremely similar along the whole way here. But yeah, that was my little. I thought, oh, well, my little copper structure did something because I've heard of them, the people, doing it to bust the clouds and all that, and building these structures. And there was the name of one of them, like the Cloud Buster. um, but anyways, yeah, it was super cool and really easy thing to implement. You could go buy copper; it's pretty cheap. Buy some copper pipes and some copper wire and and just play around with it. That was my favorite part. Like I really just went out and because there's not really any like tutorials out there, on YouTube how to do electroculture, but more people are talking about it now, which is super cool. And like you mentioned, like it's just resurfacing. It's just resurfacing. So that's super cool. Um, okay, I wanted to ask you, okay, this has been something that I've been thinking about a lot and um kind of talking about the free energy. And so I kind of want to know your perspective. And you might not have an answer, but I'm sure you'll have something to say on it. When we're talking about harnessing free energy from the earth, right? Like, so we're talking along the lines of like what Nikola Tesla was doing and what the cathedrals are doing and what we're doing with the electroculture, right? You're kind of increasing the energy of the earth. Um, you know, we know electromagnetic frequencies can be really harmful, like non-native ones. I wonder, like, where the difference lies here in if we're using like energy harvested from like the free energy, we're using that versus these electromagnetic frequencies. I kind of wonder if you could explain maybe the difference there, or if there's a connection, or is it like the source? Maybe if you've ever thought of that, I don't really know. But am I being clear in my question here?
Oh yeah, Yeah. I got an answer for you too as well because it
Cool.
relates. But Nathan B. Stubenfield, when he created his
Yeah.
first telephone and radio, he used the earth to communicate. So he would actually take a copper rod, place it into the earth with copper around it, and he would be able to communicate through the earth, not through the air. It's actually going through the earth. So now we have cell phone towers, which work on the radio system, which go through the air instead. Now, what happened was when Marconi was creating these first radios and using the telegraph and all those other things, they were all started on fire because you're using so much energy. You have to keep producing energy, but keep burning oil and whatever you need to do to produce that energy to use this system. And that's why you see like cell phone towers, you see there's like a transformer next to it because it's using so much energy to function. Versus Nathan B. Stubenfield was like, we don't need to use any of that. And you can do it all for free and you can call your neighbor and you can just connect it into the ground. So you have a non natural frequency, which impacts our health. And the book, The Invisible Rainbow, is a great one on that for people to look into. And then you have these natural frequencies. And when I study back in time to Tesla and Nathan B. Stubenfield and earth batteries and everything that they were understanding, they realized that we could just use the earth. It's always giving us energy. And Nathan B. Stubenfield's battery, this was very fascinating. He has a patent, you can look it up, and if you place that battery into the earth each day, it gets stronger and stronger and it generates more energy. So he was like, you can just light up your house using this earth battery because it's only going to get stronger from the fields in which the earth is always creating. Now, on the flip side, we have this 60 hertz that's running back and forth every single time with our electricity, and it's using unwanted energy and very inefficient. So if you start to see there's one side which is very natural, very the original way, and then you have this non natural way, which is working against the ways of nature. This is why, like the cell phone towers and all of these things are disrupting the bees, the birds, the dolphins, our brain, all of these things because they're pulsing these frequencies into the air and then we're picking up on them. Versus if we were communicating and using the energy of the earth, we don't need any of that. So it's such a different way. But if you look into the work of Nathan B. Stubenfield, whose name is not talked about much, he just has like one little statue, and whatever, per the usual. But, when you look into his work, you start to go, wow, why are we doing this? And even when I looked into things with solar panels, they came out in 1908. Why were we not using them till what, 1970s, 1980s, when maybe somebody started selling them? Where was all the efficiency and eco-friendly situation then? It wasn't there. So you start to see that things are only pitched at certain times, but everything over here is just not natural, and it goes against the way nature works. And it's funny because Victor Schauberger always talked about if you go against nature, nature will destroy you. If you go with nature, nature will help you. It's that simple. Everything is so simple. So we're just doing things completely backwards. That's the best way to describe it all.
Yeah. Go with nature, not against it. I actually heard that similar quote. I haven't read Schauberger's books yet. They're on my list, but they're kind of hard to come by, but they're on Amazon actually. Anyways, I actually stumbled upon that quote. It was a Japanese woodworker. I was on YouTube one night and he was the Japanese when they do their woodworking, they don't use nails. They have this fine joinery and it's just the most beautiful woodworking you've ever imagined, right? Like I can't get enough of it. If I were ever to learn a type of woodworking, it would be that because I think, well, one, it's beautiful, and then it's like, you're not using nails, so you avoid the forge and maybe the contamination that comes with forging metals. And I don't know, but I just think it's amazing. But I remember it was always like you got to work with the grain, and I mean that's a big woodworking quote too. You got to work with the grain and not against it. So you really see this kind of quote come out just in everything, right? Because obviously everything is connected. But you know, yeah, go with nature, not against it. I think I might have probably said that a time or two in this podcast already. But yeah, that's super cool, man. It's really cool. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
on
And when it comes to,
and I don't
go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but on that topic,
No.
moonwood. Moonwood is,
Yeah.
and this is a fun one. I'm sure if you haven't looked into it, it's a cool one to look into. But it's basically harvesting wood according to the moon cycles, and then you don't have to do anything to it. It's very, very strong because all the sap is removed out of the plant. So you get the strongest wood, the most durable wood you can ever possibly imagine. So, when you get into all of this, it's like you look at, like you just said, an ancient practice, people were understanding the energetic principle or moon cycles or solar cycles or whichever part of the realm you want to say, and they understood it. And then, yes, it's interesting because when you talk about putting like screws and other things into things, now you start to change the electrical structure of whatever you're using. So you get into this and you start to go, this makes sense. And we should research these things and these ancient practices so that we can understand how to elevate our home and our terrain. Because you could use that technique you learned and do it for something that you want for a piece of furniture, and you probably will feel the difference in the resonance of that furniture versus something else that you have.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? And it's amazing because, my dad always told, like, he would talk about this because my grandfather was like a woodsman and he sold firewood for a lot of his life. And, I remember back when he was alive, when I was just a young fella, like 5, 6 years old, we'd be going into the woods together and we'd be cutting down trees and processing firewood and all that stuff. And there's always a time and a place to cut wood, so it depends on what you're doing too with the wood, right? Like my dad would always say the best time to fell poplar trees is in the dark of the moon, right? So, um, because it would be dry and it would be like a good burning wood, right? Like poplar is a hot burning wood, right? So, um, it's funny, like, even looking back in my lineage, to that knowledge is there, right? Like my grandfather, knew, he was never schooled at university or anything, but my goodness, did he know how to fell trees and how to, you know, how to really live, he definitely provided as much as he possibly could for my dad, right? And his family, and like just had this amazing knowledge of the land. And so that's amazing that you bring that up. Yeah, like, and so it's amazing how much there is out there, right? Like when to fell, when to cut the trees, and that makes a big difference too when you're processing trees. And it's not something that's necessarily talked about, but we're obviously not taught very useful skills anymore at school. Yeah,
Well, and also too
yeah,
the material that you cut the tree with. That's another
yeah,
thing. We use a lot of iron and a lot
sure.
of steel. What happened if everybody was using copper and bronze? I always wondered when a tree is cut why it doesn't regrow from that one spot. But if I cut an onion, it starts to regrow. So then
Sure.
what's the situation? What is different between the onion and the tree? And then
Hmm.
you start to wonder, well, if I used a different type of material, imagine if I used a crystal blade, like quartz or something like that. Would there be a completely different, impact to the tree if you cut the tree than if you use, for example, steel or iron, which usually deadens the tree? So it's really
Yeah.
interesting. Like you think of materials and resonance and all these things, and it's just some stuff that you have to like wonder, like, yeah, like all of these things are impacting something, but we're just not paying attention. Or, like you said, your grandfather said, this when you were a little kid and you never understood it until we're sitting here today. And that happens to me all the time where I look back and I'm like, wow, that's what somebody was saying to me. That's what my grandpa said, or that's what my grandma said. I never understood it. And my grandma always said, health is wealth. It's the only thing that you own. And in this podcast, as we talk about this, it is true. Like you can
Yeah.
own your health, and it is the only thing you can own. They can take things from you, but you always have your health. So, and I think it's important for people to realize. But yeah, it's fascinating when you get into all of these topics.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I have those realizations all the time. It's like, dad always raised me to be like financially intelligent too. And then, he gave me a book, The Wealthy Barber, and I read it. And then, I got into the finance books and I'd read it. I'd be like, Dad, like you're supposed to do this with your money and all that. He's like, I was like, he would say, I've been telling you this for years, buddy. Like, it's funny. But yeah, yeah, like listening to our elders, that's something that I think has been really lost, honestly. And um I think it's really disheartening too because the way that we treat our elders now too is deteriorating over time, especially with putting them in homes. And obviously, you have these new diseases like Alzheimer's coming up, and you know, if there was ever something that should be deliberate, it should be the creation of Alzheimer's because you're really cutting off the wisdom, like you're really cutting it off well there with having people lose their minds at the end of their life. They're not able to really share the wisdom that they've collected over a lifetime with you, right? So, and I think it's really, really sad, honestly, but um I think there's the new shift in a greater understanding of these diseases nowadays as well, obviously. But um, I don't know. It's just something that I think has been lost over time.
Well, and especially, with 2020, the beginning of everything was nursing homes, and those nursing homes
Yeah,
had cell phone towers on top of them. That was the
yeah,
first spot that those cell phone towers rolled out, were on top of the nursing homes and then on top of the hospitals. So as people are coming in there, they're being impacted, and then these things impact the
yeah,
mind. And like you just said, if we forget, we get taken advantage of. That's why I quoted like 1976 and that whole situation. That's a year in which they pulled the exact same playbook as 2020. But if we weren't around, or our elders don't know, or they don't remember, then they get taken advantage of too, or they were too young. If they were too young, they
yeah,
didn't recall that. And I had one guy I'll never forget. He's like, he messaged me. He's like 82 years old. He's like, I've been through everything. He's like, he goes, what do you say? He's like, if I've been through everything and I've seen it all, so don't believe anything you've been told or take it at face value. He's like, I've seen it all at 82 years and whatever else, and it's like that's important. That's wisdom, because if we forget these things and then are like, oh, consumed in this mindset of like I said, scarcity, fear, everything else, then we're controlled. And we should take care of the our elders as well, because they took care of us. I mean, they were like raising people and using all their energy. They should be taken care of and loved as well. Because what did they do all of that for? So you really have to understand. And back in the day when my grandparents went through a lot of situations with their health, you know, people just throw people away, and it's horrible.
yeah,
Nobody should go through any of that, especially with all the things they did in their life, and then just toss them. It's sickening, actually. So, it's important that we take care of our elders. And then also, even these books, the whole reason I talk about these books and for people to read books is because a lot of these people aren't around anymore. Their books are absolutely phenomenal, and people need to, dive into them. But they work so hard in their life too. They're an elder giving us information. So, we need to connect more back into books and more into the past, because there was so much beautiful information, and it debunks everything in which we were told. So it's a win-win on both sides.
yeah. Well, we're always told we should learn from history. But my favorite quote, I think Hegel said it is, "We learn from history that we don't learn from history."
Perfect.
Yeah. Anyways, I think we kind of come full circle here. I think it'd be a good time to wrap up. So why don't you, if do you have any final words for the audience,
So just on the topic, remove the fear, and there's always solutions. That's what Cultivate Elevate's all about, and that's why I've been just putting out as much information that I can of some sort of solution. Because when I had my health ailment, the professionals told me I was getting older and it's genetic, and that's it. And then I didn't know what to do. So I'm really big on trying to provide a solution so that we can move past that. Because I realize if we don't take care of our health and we don't get out of the fear, then we just keep going through the perpetual loop. So, my thing is big on, we don't need fear, and there is always solutions, but I'm big on putting that out there. And our website and all of the information, if you find us on Cultivate Elevate and our Telegram and everything, it's all got a ton of information for people to learn if you want to start looking into things, and really just expanding your consciousness on what you've been sold.
Great. Yeah, so the best place for the listener to reach you, Instagram, your Telegram website. Maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit. How they can support you as well.
So they can find us on cultivateelevate.com. We have if anybody wants to support, we have a wide range of superfoods that help to heal pathways. I'm really big on healing pathways and understanding which pathway needs which foods and nutrition. But you can find our website, cultivateelevate.com. We have an Instagram, which is always censored all the time, like whatever. So it's Cultivate Elevate. And then we also have a Telegram, a YouTube, and a Rumble channel, which I try to put more things on there too. Because back in what most people don't know is about 2020, 2021, all of my pages were wiped. And when it was wiped, that all the information was lost. So I'm really big on putting it every single place I can so that people have access to the information.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I try to do that too. Get it on YouTube, BitChute, Rumble, podcast, talking on Instagram. But I'm sure at one point, well, yeah, we'll go through a little cycle of deletion. But anyways, that's great. Yeah, and yeah, I'm really interested in your pearl powder. Actually, I think that's something I really want to try, and that might be a topic for another time. But I think that's super cool, honestly, and probably has a lot of historic roots too. So yeah, I'm definitely going to try some of that, and maybe I'll let the listeners know on my social media how it goes. And but yeah, that's pretty much it, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on. This was a great discussion today.
Thank you for having me on, and we'll definitely do another.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure. All right, I want to thank you, the listener, for listening. You should all know that this is not medical advice. This is for your informational purposes only. But remember that we're all responsible, sovereign beings capable of thinking, criticizing, understanding absolutely anything in the world. We're moving away from scarcity in this podcast. Everything is not is the opposite of scarcity. We're into the abundance mindset here. Everything is abundant, and abundance is certainly a mindset. With people with greater forces are together self-healers, self-governable, self-teachers, and so much more. Please reach out if you have any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, whatever. Reach me on beyond.terrain on Instagram. Truly appreciate everyone that listened today. I really do. And if you found it informative, if you liked it in any way, please like, share, comment, review, subscribe, whatever you got to do on the platform you listen to. And remember, there's two types of people in the world: those who think they can, those who think they can't, and they're both correct. All right, guys, take care.